Hey there guys, it's Tina and I'm back. And I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. If you're also back, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again. But if you're new and maybe you like what you see, please consider subscribing. We have tons of fun here on this channel talking about makeup and all things beauty. And today we have a fun video in store. We are talking all about the collaboration palette between Melt Cosmetics and Bailey Sarian. This is the Fatal Years palette. I had to pick it up, all right? First of all, I love Melt Cosmetics. I tend to pick up all their 10-pan eyeshadow palettes, and this is an all matte version. I don't know much about Bailey Sarian herself, but from what I've heard, she's a sweetheart. So I wanted to grab this palette and try it out. Plus, you guys requested that I test it out because you wanted to hear my feedback. So if you want to hear my thoughts, you want to see swatches, you want to see an eyeshadow look, then let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so let's start out with the details for this palette. Again, this is from Melt Cosmetics and Bailey Sarian. It is the Fatally Yours eyeshadow palette. There's a full collection along with this palette that includes gel eyeliners, so matte cream eyeliners, as well as glitter gels. There are also liquid lipsticks in a set of 3 and some matte lipsticks. There's also a heart-shaped black makeup bag included in the collection. And on the Melt Cosmetics website, you can buy various bundles. So there's a bundle with the bag, the gel liners, and glitter gels along with the eyeshadow palette and the bullet lipsticks. You can also buy the gel liners with the gel glitters and the eyeshadow palette, or you can choose to buy all 4 of the bullet lipsticks together. You can also buy each of the products and shades of lipsticks individually. The only thing that isn't separated is that trio of liquid lipsticks, which is sold as a set. So if you wanted to check out more from the collection, check out the Melt Cosmetics website. But we're only talking about the palette in this video because I didn't pick up the accoutrement, all right? So this is the Fatally Yours palette. It retails for $58. It has a net weight of 17.96 grams or 0.63 ounce, which equates to 0.063 ounce per eyeshadow. This palette was made in the USA and has an intended usage life of 12 months. I will read directly from the Melt Cosmetics website where this palette is currently available. I don't know if it will be available at Sephora, whether online or in store, but I did buy mine off the Melt Cosmetics website. I got free shipping and I also had a 10% discount. So it says here, carefully curated by Bailey Sarian herself, this palette includes 10 rich and velvety shades in our signature ultra matte formula. Unleash the boldness within you with this gorgeous grungy color story, blendable, buildable, and ultra pigmented for the most unique color combinations every time. And I'll show you the swatches and walk you through the shades. We have Arsenic, which is an apricot beige, perfect for blending. Again, all these shades are matte. Cyanide is a matte dirty mustard. Thallium is a burnt umber, which is really like a dark brick orange. We have Mercury, which is a dark hazel brown. Sarin is a deep wine, while Phosgene is a dirty moss green. Resin is a medium sepia brown, which is more on the warm tone side with a little hint of red. We have Kerosene, which is a muted dusty blue. Strychnine, which is a deep teal, and Lead, which is a matte black. And all these shades are names of chemical compounds, which was interesting. I'm not too sure about Bailey and like what her interests are. From what I know about Bailey Sarian, she is a beauty and makeup content creator on YouTube and Instagram. I don't know about TikTok because I don't follow all that. But she creates beauty content and she got really popular for her Murder Mystery Makeup Mondays, where she retells a true crime story while applying her makeup. She also started a podcast, which is a spin-off of her murder mystery videos. It's called Dark History, where she delves into some historical stories. She is considered to be the mother of the true crime and makeup genre on YouTube. And that's not really my vibe, so that's why I haven't really watched her. I prefer my true crime content to be a bit more evidence and fact-based and focused on the victim and their life rather than the storytelling aspect of it. So that's why I haven't really gotten into her content. And from what I've heard from other creator friends of mine and even you guys, she seems to be a sweetheart, a really nice person. So there is not really heavy negativity surrounding her, except for the victim impact of her videos. I know there has been some controversy, and again, that's why I don't really jive with her genre of video. Like, I want the victims to have their stories told, and if the families don't appreciate your coverage of their stories, then don't do it, right? So take that for what it's worth. Again, I heard that she's a really lovely person, so I didn't hesitate when considering picking this palette up, right? So now that I've gotten that out the way and you've seen the palette up close and personal and seen some swatches, I do want to show you a comparison of this palette up against other existing Melt Cosmetics palettes, because there seems to be a little bit of crossover, because Melt Cosmetics and Bailey Sarian have a very similar aesthetic, right? I think it's a perfect pairing for this collaboration. They fit so well. Melt Cosmetics tends to have a more grungy, smoky vibe to their color stories and their palettes, so I thought it was such a great fit for them to collaborate with Bailey Sarian. And I like what they created together, but it seems to be very Melt Cosmetics coded, right? Meaning that it's given Melt Cosmetics, it's given their existing palettes, it's given past palettes. So I wanted to go through my palette collection, which is the majority of their releases. I know, I have most of their palettes. I'm gonna go through all my palettes and show you the similar shades and see what you think, if they're duplicates or if they're just similar shades. So let's get into the comparisons right now. And it was at this point that I realized just how many Melt eyeshadow palettes I have. As you can see, I pretty much have the majority of the Melt palettes that are available in the long packaging with the 10-pan eyeshadows. I also have a couple of the smaller palettes that are 8 pans, but for the most part, I have all their palettes. So let's go ahead and look at similar palettes in my collection. Starting out with the newest palettes. So we have the Halloween Town and Christmas Town palettes. And I wanted to look at the newly released palettes from Melt in comparison to the Bailey Sarian collaboration palette, because they were released around the same time, just a couple of weeks apart. This is the Halloween Town palette. Usually when they create palettes, they're thinking about color stories. So I wanted to see if the color stories, any of the shades were crossover shades, because they could have been left over from the collaboration, or they could have been left over from the Christmas Town or the Halloween Town palette. You know how that goes. So two close shades that I see are Kerosene from Fatally Yours and then Ragdoll. And then we have Ooze and Strychnine. Ooze is more of a blackened teal, while Strychnine is a dark forest green. I'm going to swatch the shades anyway, just to show you that they aren't really similar. So there you have Ragdoll and Kerosene, like I said, not similar enough. And then Ooze and Strychnine. Again, similar shades, but not identical. Ooze is more blue-based teal, and then Strychnine is definitely more green and a little bit darker as well. So similar shades, not identical, but I feel like you can still get similar looks from these two shades. But one similarity for sure is that they stain my fingertips. So moving on. Next we have the Christmas Town palette, released closer to the Fatally Yours release. Again, no true similar shades. Well, I take that back. We have Smithereens and Strychnine. These may be closer because they're both dark greens. So let's check those out. Here is Smithereens and Strychnine. Again, Strychnine is definitely like a blackened green. And maybe Nightmare, these two shades, Nightmare and Sarin. Those may be similar as well, but not identical. Sarin is definitely more of a blackened wine shade. All right, I think that's it for the Christmas Town palette as well. A very similar palette is Gemini. You can see the greens right away jump out as similar. I've always loved these mustard and olivey shades from Gemini. This is the new edition, by the way. I purchased the new one because they did like a quick reformulation, a repressing, whatever it is. I got the new version. I think it's a new package as well. But we see some similar mustard olive shades. So let's see which ones are the closest. I think Fire OG and Phosgene may be close, right? Maybe Cyanide and Lorelei. No, Lorelei is definitely lighter. Arsenic is probably similar to Polka Dot and Luna, but it's like a mix of those two shades. It's an in-between shade. And Ricin doesn't truly look like any of the shades here. It's like a mix, if I could say anything. I feel like a lot of the shades are mixed from Gemini. So let's do Cyanide and Lorelei, just for shits and giggles. Cyanide definitely has more green to it. And let's do Arsenic and Polka Dot. Arsenic is definitely lighter and more of a beige. Polka Dot is more of a tan. Phosgene and maybe Fire OG. Let's see those two. So Phosphine and Fire OG. Similar, but Fire OG is a little bit deeper. A little bit more on the olive side. I feel like Phosphine has a lot of mustard, like yellowy tones to it. Similar shades, but not identical. All right, next victim. Here's 27, which is a neutral palette. I don't expect to see too many shades that are similar because 24/7 was more of a peachy, even rosy palette. Maybe Moxie, a little bit of an orange. Yeah, that's it. Well, let's see. Arsenic. No, Arsenic is definitely warmer. So let's just look at Moxie and Thallium. Nope. Moxie is more orange. Thallium is a deeper, richer shade. All right, that's all I can see in this palette. Next. Here we have Gemini 2, which is a rosy palette with one little olive guy sitting down. The olive is probably close to Ricin again. What do you guys think? Let's see. I just feel like these shades are so Melt Cosmetics coated that they're going to look similar no matter what. So Ricin and Almond Eyes. Similar, but Almond Eyes is a little bit more gray toned. It's a little bit more sooty, but similar. No cigar though, so next. Millennial Pink, I don't expect any, well, I take that back now because we do have Euphoria, so we do have a black there. Let's try it out. Euphoria and Lead. Lead is not even like a truly rich black. It's like a sooty, cool tone black. It's a little bit more on the inky side, I feel like, than Euphoria, which is a little bit like a charcoal, like almost gray. A little bit different, but again, very similar. So that's the only shade here. Melt coated, like I said. Then we have 24/7. This one should have some similar tones as well because we have those mustardy greens. Let's dig in. I feel like Ricin and Chronic, maybe Phosgene and Faded, and Cyanide looks, well, it's not really giving me any extremely similar shades. There's some mix in here. I feel like Blunt is the closest because Full Melt is a little bit too orange. All right, let's swatch them out. Looking at it, Arsenic and Hash are similar. I have stain in everywhere, oh my God, but not identical at all. Then let's do Cyanide and Blunt. So Cyanide, Blunt, similar, not identical. And then Ricin and, ooh, Dank. Let's do that, Ricin, Dank. Not identical again. Similar shades. I feel like there's a vibe going here, which makes sense again because Melt Cosmetics does a lot of these olivey greens that are in this palette and mustardy neutral shades. So similar, not identical. Moving on. Here's the original Gemini, by the way, in case you were curious. Did they change? Oh my God, did they change the black shade? Did Gemini already have a black or is that new? Let's try it out anyway. So the Gemini black and then Lead from Fatally Yours. Similar, I mean, they're blacks. What are we gonna do here, right? But no identical shades. Now I gotta look at Gemini. Yeah, it had a black, so why didn't I swatch the black before? Am I nuts? I'm a little bit nuts, I feel like. But yeah, let's keep it pushing. The blacks are similar, not identical. And then the dark brown, Mercury. It's not really similar to these dark browns. I think we have other dark browns elsewhere. Let's look at Electric. Electric is one of the newer palettes that launched this year. It's Electrip. What is it called? It's Electrip. All right, so I only see the dark brown, but I don't think that's even gonna be close. Reefer, I should say, because you know it's weed. Reefer and Mercury, not similar. One is warm and then one is cool. So nothing here in Electrip. Let's look at my favorite palettes, Muerte. Oh my God, these are my favorite palettes from Melt of all time. And I think some similar shades are here. We have Duelo, okay, and what else? That's it. Duelo, no, we have Velorio and Sarin. All right, so let's look at those. Velorio and Sarin. Okay, Velorio and Sarin. Oh my God, similar. Sarin's a little bit richer. Just a little bit though, by a hair. And then Duolo and Strychnine. So Duolo and Strychnine. Green versus like a teal. I think Strychnine is going to stand out a little bit against all these teals that Melt Cosmetics has. So we won't necessarily have identical shades. This one is Vita from the same holiday collection as Muerte. But the shades aren't identical again. They're similar, but I feel like, yeah, they're no really truly identical shade. Well, you know what? I take that back again the more I'm looking at it. Keep in mind, these are my first impressions comparing the palettes, so I may not see the shades right away. So I think Agua Ardente and Ricin look a little similar, right? I don't think Chocolate and Mercury are similar at all though. So let's do Ricin and Agua Al Dente. So Ricin, Agua Al Dente, which is a little bit cooler toned. Okay, more olive in the Ricin shade and a little bit more cool gray to Agua Ardente. So not identical. I'm making a mess and I don't like it. All right, next up we have Rustic. All right. Ooh, my Rustic palette looks trashed. Ooh, some similar shades jumping out here. So what do we think of Rust and Thallium? Yeah? And then, I still don't think Mercury's gonna vibe because Rot 2 is a black and brown. Yeah, so I think the only shade that we have here is Rust and Thallium. So let's do those. Which ones did I do? I don't know, but is this Rust? Okay, that's Thallium. All right, so Rust is lighter and Thallium is just a richer shade. Also, we have to account for formula changes and that my palettes are older as well, so the shades may not be as pigmented. Here we have Mary Jane, which may have some browns in here. Let's see. Similar to Mercury? No? Nope, I wouldn't say that. Gaspar, I don't think is even well, maybe a little bit. I think Ricin is just gonna be more olive tone than all these shades. So Ricin and Gaspar, yeah, it's just gonna be more olive than the other shades. So nothing in Mary Jane. Then we have Dark Matter, which is one of the newer palettes, and I don't like this layout. It's one of listen, okay, it's a long design, so it's the long palette, you know, it matches the rest of the shapes, but the pans are circular pans, which I don't like. And then in Dark Matter we have the black, and then the names aren't even in it. Ew. So the black is Dark Matter. And then what else? That's it, really. Arsenic. Maybe it's close to, what's that shade? Unseen? Yeah. Let's see. Arsenic and Unseen. I just don't, yeah. Arsenic is lighter for sure. And then Lead, it's a black. I don't know what to tell you. So Dark Matter and Lead. So Lead, Dark Matter. Dark Matter is just a little bit better of a black. I feel like it's been richer than the other blacks so far. So nothing to see in Dark Matter. And now we're just left with the smaller eyeshadow palette. So the 8 pans. We have She's in Parties, which has Mean Streak, which is a dark burgundy. Again, very melt coated. So Dark Matter, very similar. Yeah, that is very similar indeed. That's the closest we probably have, right? So She's in Parties has an almost identical shade to Fatally Yours. That's the only shade though. And then we have Smoke Sessions, which has the greens. Ooh, we have Space Queen, right? It's gonna be more teal though. And that's what I think is gonna give Fatally Yours that edge over the other palettes. Melt does a lot of teals, dark teals, right? Oh, that swatched really great, right? But it doesn't have a true like dark forest green, like true green, you see? So similar, no cigar. Blueprint, I don't think, listen, it's Blueprint. What are we gonna see here? Nothing to see. Even the dark brown is not gonna be the same, so nothing here. And then last up, a brunette, which has neutrals. Ooh, brunette itself may be a little bit close to Mercury. Let's try that one. Look at all the staining. I can't get it off, y'all. Why am I gonna have black fingertips? Anyway, let's try brunette and Mercury. So brunette is a warm brown, but Mercury is just deeper, richer, like a coffee brown, like chalk. Ooh, so nice. So there you have all the palettes in my collection from Melt up against the Bailey Sarian Fatally Yours palette. We've had some similar shades, but nothing identical, which is good to see. But again, I feel like it's very melt coated. So these shades fit with the aesthetic of Melt, and they're very similar to other shades that Melt has released. So if you mix a couple of the shades, you can get something very close to the shades in this palette, but they aren't identical, except for maybe the black. It's a black. What are we gonna do? And then the Sarin shade we saw in the She's in Parties palette, that we have a very similar, if not identical shade. But other than that, nothing is going to be exactly identical, which is actually a positive thing. So let's go ahead and jump into an eyeshadow look. Alright, so we are ready to do an eyeshadow look featuring this palette. It's all matte, and that's actually my favorite type of look to do. I may incorporate a shimmer here or there, but I'm really an all matte girly, so this palette is right up my alley. And I feel like some of the looks are going to be intuitive from this palette because most of the shades kind of go together, right? So we have the olivey greens and the more nudie tones that play into each other. We also have warmer browns with a wine red shade, a deep like blackened wine burgundy, and then we have teals that kind of go together. Now, I want to lean into more of the neutral shades, so let's just go for that. So let's go ahead and start out with the shade Arsenic, which is one of the lightest shades in the palette. This is described as an apricot beige to me. It's a peachy tan shade, and I'm just using a Singe Beauty F07 brush. It's a small face brush, but obviously you can use any brush you want in any way. And I love using these larger brushes in my crease area to apply just a wash of color. So that's what I'm doing right now, just to set my base down, which is my MAC Lane Low Paint Pot. I applied an eyeshadow base and primer before, you know, coming in to do this look. And you'll see it's a nice wash of color. It's just going to be very airy and light. It's not going to be a really pigmented laydown of the shade. I feel like we should lean into the warmer orangey tones and mustard shades rather than the olive shades. So I'm going to grab the shade Thallium, which is kind of the matte rust shade. And I'm applying that with a smaller blending brush. This is from Refer, and it's smaller than the F07 brush from Singe Beauty, obviously, right? Because this is a small face brush that I used as a large eyeshadow blending brush. So smaller, but as an eyeshadow blending brush, this is a larger size. This is the 15 Max from Refer, and they're still having their holiday sale. So I'll link them down below so you can check them out. That is an affiliate link. So I'm using this brush. This is a natural hair brush. So it works really well with matte eyeshadows, synthetic brushes, and I'm just giving you a little bit of tips and tricks right now while I'm doing this. So synthetic brushes work really well with shimmer shades, while natural hair brushes work really well with matte shades to give a beautiful diffused look. Now this color is intense, and it actually looks different on my eye than it does in the palette. In the palette, it looks like a brick orange, but on my eye, you see it darkened up a little bit, and that could be due to the concealer that I have down or the paint pot, which has a little bit of moisture to it. So if these matte shades hit moisture, they can deepen up and darken up. So just be mindful of that. A way to get around that is to set your eyeshadow base or primer with a very light dusting of like a translucent powder, like a loose translucent powder. That will kind of absorb some of that moisture and prevent these shades from sticking too much and prevent it from creating a little bit of that harshness from where the primer is kind of clinging to the eyeshadow. But that is applying really well and blending out nicely. And you see it's a warmer shade. It's even leaning into like a ruddy red tone rather than a full-on warm orange. But I love that, right? All right, now let's go into Sarin, which is the matte burgundy. It's kind of a deep wine shade with a little bit of purple to it. Stunning. And I'm using the same Refer brush because I just want to place that in the same area just the outer V. So what I'm doing is building dimension and gradient with these shades. So it's blowing out from this rich wine into more of that rusty orange. Oh my God. All right, these are applying so well and they're building up nicely, except I have a little, you see that? I think that has to do with the eyeshadow primer, but it may not at the same time. So just be a little bit careful here. That can happen when you're layering shades and they don't necessarily stick to your eyelids or stick to other eyeshadow that you have down. So something to keep an eye out for, but you can just build on top of it. And now I'm gonna go in with a Singe Beauty E06 brush. This is more of a shader brush, but it almost doubles as a blending brush, and I'm gonna blend out the edge of that wine shade. And now for the lid, what should we do? There's not a lot we can do just based on the options in the palette. So let's go back in, right, with the Thallium shade and the shader brush, the E06, and place it on the lid. So we have it in the crease, but we're gonna place it on the rest of the lid, like the center lid, because this palette is filled with mid-tone and deeper shades. There are no real light shades. So I'm limited in what I can do as far as an eyeshadow look goes. And this color is definitely deepening up, which is not necessarily ideal, right? If you are looking for anything that's gonna be light in this palette, forget about it. It's not gonna happen, which is fine. It's fine, because I like deeper shades, so it actually works out for me. Just be mindful, if you're looking for something light, this is not it, okay? So now let's go back to Arsenic, which is the lightest shade in the palette. Same brush, just flipped on the other side, and I'm going to apply that to the inner part of the lid. This is the lightest shade, and on me, it's more of a skin tone shade that leans a little bit more peachy or more on the apricot side. So on lighter skin, it's going to be a richer shade for sure. It's probably going to look like a matte peach. For me, it's a little bit like my skin tone, so I can use it as a blend-in shade, but it's definitely not light and vibrant. It's not going to add any highlight or lift to my lid. So I'm just applying that and then blending out the edges just to kind of tame the overall smokiness of the other shades that we have. And I am going to blend as much as possible right now to fade out any harsh lines that we created. And I may have a little bit of trouble just because the eyeshadows are kind of clinging to my base. So first tip for this palette is to set down your eyeshadow base. If you use a concealer, definitely set it down. You don't want any moisture on your lids when you apply these shades, or they're going to deepen up and cling. Now let me just blend out the colors together. Yeah? All right, I think that is mostly good. So let me grab a very small blending brush. This is a Sonia Kashuk blend-in crease brush. And I'm gonna grab a little bit of the black, which is lead, just because I feel like this black is telling me to do something with it. I'm gonna put it just in the outer V, just to see how it works, because there's some blacks that can take over a look, and there's some blacks that just work to add depth and dimension and can intensify a smoke. So I want to see how this black performs. It's adding a little bit of smokiness, but it's given a little bit of patchiness right here. And again, I'm wondering if that is because of the primer or these shades are just like that. I'm a little bit worried that the shades are just like that, but I can always work around it with, again, setting down my primer. All right, I think we're good on the eyeshadow. So let me go ahead, finish up my face, and show you the final look. All right, so we are back. I applied my face makeup, but I wanted to do some additional work on the eyes. So I'm going to grab just my highlighter, you know, it's just a matte highlighter shade, and apply it directly under my brows. I didn't want to do this off camera because I wanted to show you how this would apply and blend with the other shades. I'm using this shade to kind of blur the edge of the darker shades in the crease. Just like that. And then I'm going to use a little bit of that, come back in, on the inner tear duct. So I'm going to use the Singe Beauty E07 brush and grab that on the tip and just apply it on that inner tear duct area and blend it in. Again, there's no light shade in this palette, so you kind of have to find your own way to incorporate a highlight shade, a shimmer shade, or your own transition shade, which is fine by me because I already have those basic shades. I feel like this is more of a companion palette than a full-on all-in-one palette, which some people may not like. I don't mind because I can mix and match. And the great thing about these melt eyeshadow palettes is that you can pop out the pans, so they're magnetized, and any of the melt eyeshadow palettes in the same layout will fit in. So you can pop in other shades, even though, to be honest, Melt Cosmetics tends to have a darker overall theme to their palette, so you may not have a highlight shade there, but you must have that in your collection already, right? All right, next we're gonna go in with a little bit of a lower lash line color. So we're gonna grab Strychnine, which is the dark matte teal. And again, I'm just grabbing it on the E07 brush from Singe Beauty and running that along the lower lash line. This brush is great for getting right along that lower lash line, and it's really soft, so I don't feel any scratchiness at all. And that color blended out so easily. It's so pretty. And then, since we're here, let's use Kerosene, which is the lighter, kind of muted, I kind of want to call it a murky seafoam shade, but it's like a light teal that's a little bit more dusty, a little bit more murky and grungy. It's not a bright shade at all, but I wanted to use it so you could see it in this look and see the majority of the shades applied. It actually applied really well, and the pigment is there. I expected it to be a little bit more sheer, honestly, but that applied so well. So here you have it. Let me go ahead and do the mascara, lashes, and all that, and be right back to show you the final look. All right, here we have it. Here's the final look. Y'all did not expect this, right? No, you did, because you saw it in the introduction. All right, so here it is. Here's the final look. I paired it with a deep vampy lip because why not? This is Fenty Beauty liquid lipstick in Wicked Wine. Yes, and it's perfect for this grungy look. Now, here's the eyeshadow, completely done. And I'm going to let you know that happened. Yeah, I didn't do anything extra. I didn't touch anything, but we have some fade in and patchiness. This has not happened to me since the Makeup Geek disaster. So, not feeling so great about that. So here we are. All right, let's give you some final thoughts, because I have tried this palette out, not in a full look, but just applying it to test it out initially, you know, when you do makeup playtime. So I've applied it in various ways with different primers. So on bare lids, no, don't do that. With a primer set down with powder, works a little bit better. And then today I used my Lane Low Paint Pot, right? I have thoughts, so let's get into them right now, and I'll start from the top with the price point and the packaging. As already mentioned, this palette retails for $58, which is in line with the other 10-pan eyeshadow palettes from Melt Cosmetics in this format, and I anticipated and expected that price point. In fact, I expected it to be slightly higher at $60 because the Christmas Town palette and Halloween Town palette that recently launched were $60 a pop, but I think those were higher priced because of the Disney and Tim Burton affiliation. So $58, which is a steep price point. And I've come to expect that from Melt Cosmetics because their eyeshadow palettes are higher priced. Am I comfortable with that? No. Do I still pay that price point? Yes, but I try to get a discount any which way I can. And for this one, I did end up getting a discount. I think I got 10% off. So you can get it at a cheaper price point. That's the best way to approach it. But that high price point is just to be expected. And I think these palettes have gone up a couple of dollars in the last couple of years as well. So price point, pricey, but again, it's expected with Melt Cosmetics palettes. You get 12 eyeshadows for a total net weight of 17.96 grams or 0.63 ounces. The sizing we typically see in eyeshadow palettes is around the 0.03 to 0.05 ounce per eyeshadow pan. And even single eyeshadows on the market tend to be around the 0.05 ounce size. So you're getting tons of product here for the money, but it's up to you to determine the value cost trade-off, right? Yeah, you're getting tons of eyeshadow, but are you ever gonna go through this palette? Do you need that much eyeshadow? It depends on the size of your eyeshadow collection, how much you're gonna use it, how much you love these shades. So would you rather pay less for less product? I would definitely, but again, I'm a sucker for Melt eyeshadows, so I tend to get their palettes anyway. But still see if you can get a discount, especially around the holiday season. There are various codes flying around. Try to get a discount. As far as the packaging goes, it's typical to Melt Cosmetics. They do these longer, thin palettes that feel slightly weighted, so you can kind of feel the quality in the materials that they use. Inside we have a mirror, which I don't use, and it says Fatally Yours, Melt Heart, Bailey Sarian, and it's a broken heart. Why is it a broken heart? Anyway, we're not gonna get into that. And then you have the eyeshadows laid out. Again, they're magnetized and removable, so you can pop them out, rearrange them, or pop in other Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow pans to create your own color story. The names are all on the bottom of the shades in white, and I think it's cute, right? We have this rusty brown, like this warm brown plaid design going on with the Fatally Yours in silver. Again, Melt Cosmetics loves Bailey Sarian on the back and on the front. Cute, everything is cute. And then they have this added touch for the protective plastic insert, which features Bailey's eyes. This has given me a little bit Huda, you know? Huda Beauty used to do this with her palettes, and now Bailey is in on it. Her eyes are also on the front, but I thought that was a cute little touch. I do appreciate the attention to detail, and the plaid from the palette translates into the print around the eyeshadows. So inside we have that plaid design as the background to the eyeshadows, and it goes into the lip of the palette as well. So nice added touches. I think it's cute, but it's nothing too special. There's nothing extra to it, which is fine. I'm okay with it. All right, now that we've gotten through those details, let's actually talk about the product and the performance, which is what you're really here for. To preempt this, I will say that I personally like the Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow formula. I really like their matte eyeshadows, and I even get along with their shimmers. There are a lot of people that will say their formula tends to be hit or miss, with their hits being the mattes and their misses being the shimmers. I personally haven't had like a big problem with their shimmers exploding or growing mold or anything. I get along with their formula, and I enjoy picking up their palettes and using them. I do, right? And I also vibe with their color stories because I love richer, deeper matte shades, which they tend to include in their palettes. They like colorful, deep mattes, which again, I thoroughly enjoy because I love creating a smoky outer V. I love a deepening shade. So I overall do enjoy Melt Cosmetics. With that being said, let's actually talk about this palette. This is an all matte palette, so again, you don't have to struggle with the shimmer formula. This is all matte. If you're not into all matte, then this won't be the palette for you. However, if you're like me and you like to mix and match your eyeshadow palettes because you want to make use of your collection, so you don't necessarily stick to one palette, then you might enjoy this palette because it's definitely more of a companion palette. It's not truly a standalone palette for me, and I know it's not going to be a standalone for lighter skin because there are no true light shades in here. We have all mid-tones to deeper shades. There is nothing light that you can use as a highlight. There are no accent shades at all. These are strictly like for smoky and grungy looks. You're not gonna get a light look out of this palette. Even the lightest shade, which is Arsenic, is still gonna be like a mid-tone peach brown. So again, nothing light in this palette. You have to be okay with that. If you're a fan of smoky, grungy looks, yes, absolutely, you're gonna love this. If you pair your palettes, you can use these as your deepening shades, your build-in shades, and then incorporate a shimmer and a lighter shade for your highlight, your inner tear duct, and so on, depending on how you apply your eyeshadow and what your preference is, right? For me, this is great because again, I like deeper tones. If you're not into deeper shades and smoky looks, just stay away. Stay away completely. If you are not into grungy tones as well, stay away. Absolutely stay away because these shades are not bold and colorful. They're not even muted neutrals. They are grungy neutrals. So they're gonna give you kind of a lived-in smoky look. These looks are never gonna be bright and lifted at all. These are definitely more on the grungy, murky side. They are more muted tones in that they aren't punchy, right? So even the greens are more murky olive tone greens, and the punchy shade kerosene, which is this teal, you see it's not a bold color at all. So again, if you're not into this kind of color story, you're not going to enjoy this palette. In addition to that, it's not the easiest to work with. I know, and this is interesting to me because again, I've never truly had this issue with Melt Cosmetics eyeshadows, but I already showed you. This little patchy situation is not ideal. And again, I've played with the shadows before, so I've kind of experienced a variation of this each time, and that's not ideal. You have to be very careful with the base or primer that you put down. You have to set it, like completely set it down, which almost counteracts the point of having a primer because your primer is there for your eyeshadows to stick to. But if you do leave like a damp or a more moist primer behind, you're going to end up with your eyeshadow clinging to certain areas and deepening and darkening, and then it can lead to this patchy situation that I have going on where my eyeshadow faded, and it's not cute. It's not cute. I didn't touch this and it hasn't been that long and this happened. And this, wait for it, this is my good eye. I know you're like, your good eye. Yeah, this is the eye that creases the least. If I get any creasing, it tends to be this eye because I have more of a hood on this eye, right? So this eye has a defined crease. It opens up. So I never get this kind of situation, but yet this is the eye that showed the problem. And I was hoping that it would happen. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I was hoping I could show you that on camera, right? I could capture the problems that I was having in case it was like repetitious, right? So in case like, all right, the problems that I saw initially, I would just tell you about it, mention it. But now that it happened again, I can say that these eyeshadows are definitely the issue. It wasn't my application method. It hasn't been my technique or my primer. It's truly the eyeshadows. So you have to be a little bit more careful with your application. They're a little bit more finicky. Is that something you necessarily want to deal with? I don't know. It's up to you. I will still use this palette because I do like the shades and I think they're great for building, again, depth, but I have to be a little bit more careful. Take that experience and make your decision. Are you willing to put up with that for a $58 eyeshadow palette? maybe not, especially since the color story is so niche. It's definitely not like a typical color story that everyone can get use out of. So use those factors to determine if it's worth picking up. For me, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's a very versatile palette. I don't think it's a very user-friendly palette, especially for beginners, especially at that price point. You can get better palettes at that price point with similar shades, but maybe not as many grungy shades, and they'll work better. I'm just saying, all right? And I'll mention like a couple of palettes that people brought up, such as the Autumn's Rain palette from Sydney Grace. This one is a little bit more cohesive. I think it's similar, not really, right? We do have the dark teal, sure. And then we have a couple of the neutral shades, but I don't think it's a color story that necessarily duplicates the Fatally Yours palette, but it's a similar vibe. But I think this color story was just better executed, and we have the shimmer shades. This is one of my favorite palettes from Sydney Grace, by the way. I don't know if they still have it. Someone also mentioned the Subculture palette, and it's funny that you mention it because the last time I had this kind of issue was with the Subculture palette. Right? So it's interesting. And I also made sure that this is declared as an eyeshadow palette and not a pigment palette. It does say eyeshadow. So the pigments that are restricted by the FDA apparently aren't in this palette. So I don't expect it to behave like a pressed pigment palette like Subculture, right? Subculture does have a similar color story. We have the dark teal. We have like the blackened eggplant shade, which is not quite a wine shade, but you know, similar enough. We have like the mustard, we have the olive shades. So I think Subculture is very similar, but I kind of like the Subculture color story a little bit better. But again, a little trickier to work with. In fact, I haven't really pulled out Subculture a lot because it is trickier to work with. Someone also mentioned the ColourPop and Raw Beauty Christie at Forest Side palette, which I will agree, it looks very similar to this palette as well, the color story. So we have the dark teals and the dark green, we have that olivey tone, we have a mustard shade, but we have some shimmers in here, and then more rosy mauve tones. We don't quite have the mauve tones in the Fatally Yours palette, but similar vibe, right? It's given the same feel, so I definitely see the similarities. Not an exact dupe at all, but I see the vibe. I see it. And interestingly enough, that palette I also had an issue with. So maybe that color story is not necessarily the best for people to put in palettes. It makes sense if you're mixing and matching your eyeshadows, but they don't necessarily go together as one, as a cohesive color story for a single look. I mean, I created a look, but you know, it is what it is. So to summarize my final thoughts, I think this is a very specific palette for a very specific taste and style of makeup because it's dark, it's grungy, it's murky. It's definitely for someone who prefers dark smoky looks, or for someone that's going to use it as a companion palette to create that grungy color story. Oh, I didn't even mention this part. Wait, pause. Staining on my fingertips. Even the black stain, I have washed my hands several times trying to get rid of it, but I still have a little bit of staining on my fingertips. Keep that in mind because it's gonna probably stain your eyes a little bit as well. Primer, all that stuff, remove with an oil-based remover, but just be mindful of that, a little bit of staining. So, again, grungy, smoky, murky tones. Not an all-in-one palette because there are no light shades and no shimmers, which I know people love to include shimmers. I like an all matte look, so that's not really an issue for me. But I still had to pull in a blend-in shade because even though Arsenic works for me as a blend-in shade, it's a little bit deeper. So I would still pull in a transition shade and then a highlight shade because there's not one in this palette. And then I had issues with the patchiness and the blending. I mean, it takes some elbow grease to really blend and move these around without them sticking in place and creating like dark spots and then the patchiness, right? And again, the shades kind of deepen up. I didn't mention this in the review, but you saw it in the application. They apply a little bit darker. They almost oxidize when they touch your skin. So it's like what you see in the palette is not necessarily what you're gonna get. They deepen up a little bit. So take that for what it's worth. I don't recommend it. I know, it sounds bad because Bailey seems like such a great person and this is kind of her first collaboration, right, with makeup. So is it? Maybe? I don't know. I'm not sure. And I actually think it's a good pairing between the collaborator and the brand because they have very similar aesthetics, right? But it was a disappointing palette for me. And that could just be me. Maybe other people had a better experience. But if you wanted my thoughts, skip it. You can skip this one. And with that being said, I'm gonna wrap it up. I will leave links below in case you wanted to pick it up though. That link is through the Melt Cosmetics website because I don't think it will be available on Sephora. It might go to Sephora, but who knows? I'll still link the Melt Cosmetics website down below where you can pick it up. There'll also be more information about the palettes. There are also affiliate links to different brands and my affiliate codes, so you can support the channel using those links. Gives me a kickback to put right back into the content, so I truly appreciate your support. I will also leave links to my Instagram and Twitter where you can follow me along. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you. Bye, guys.